May not be much to y'all, but I gotta ride, baby. I gotta ride. I gotta ride. I gotta ride, baby. It's mine. It's mine. I don't care how regular it is. This belongs to me. It's mine.
Finesse2Tymes' mom just exposed him for leaving her broke. She came out and said her son, one of the most talked about rappers in Memphis, left her struggling to survive while he was out here living lavish, facing eviction, no money, nowhere to turn. And what she revealed about how he has been spending his money is something you need to hear for yourself. This situation goes way deeper than just a family argument. And by the time we get through all of it, you are going to understand exactly why this became one of the most talked about stories in hip hop. Stay locked in. But real quick, if you're serious about winning in the rap game, I put everything I know into one ebook. I'm talking how to actually grow an audience from zero, how to get labels reaching out to you with deals, and even how to get paid in this industry without ever touching a mic. And nah, it's not too late. People love to say the wave passed. It didn't. New artists and new hustlers are blowing up every single day. And the ones eating are the ones who started now instead of waiting. It's only $39. That's a few cups of coffee for a blueprint that can change how you move in this game forever. Links in the description bio. Go grab it. Then let's get back to the video. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are breaking down the full story between Finesse2Tymes and his mother Pluria Alexander. We are getting into her public accusations, the GoFundMe, the eviction, the legal issues, the viral used car video, how 50 Cent got involved, and what Finesse himself said when he decided to finally respond. This one is personal, messy, and impossible to look away from. Let's get into it. The controversy exploded into public view when Pluria Alexander, the mother of Finesse2Tymes, began sharing emotional statements and social media posts accusing her son of cutting off her financial support and leaving her in a desperate situation. Alexander, who had relocated from Memphis to Texas, said the move had left her without the community connections and support system she had built back home. And when the financial assistance from her son stopped following the falling out between them, she was left with almost nothing to fall back on. The story spread immediately across hip-hop media outlets, YouTube channels, and social media platforms because of the visceral contrast it presented. Here was a rapper widely associated with luxury, jewelry, designer clothes, and an enviable lifestyle. And his own mother was publicly asking strangers on the internet for help to avoid losing her roof. What made the story particularly powerful was that Alexander was not vague or indirect about what she was saying. She named her son. She described the specifics of her situation with detail. She put photographs of her packed belongings online. She launched a fundraiser with a concrete dollar amount.
Taking packages back and forth to the post office every day. Just so happened this one time when I got paid, they dropped $500,000 in my account. I keep talking about that $500,000, the feds got it.
She came out directly and said his actions had left her homeless, and that this had now happened 3 separate times. Before we go further, it is worth understanding who Finesse2Tymes actually is, because for some people watching this story unfold online, this was their first real introduction to him. Finesse2Tymes, born Ricky Hampton, is a Memphis-bred rapper who built his following through an unfiltered approach to documenting street life, money, relationships, and the kind of raw authenticity that Memphis rap has always been known for. He released his breakout track Back End in 2022, a song that spread aggressively across social media and established him as one of the more credible street voices coming out of Memphis in that period. He has had a complicated personal history, including serious prison time. He was charged with aggravated robbery in 2010 and sentenced to 8 years, serving 6. He later faced a felony gun possession charge in 2017 and served another 5 years before returning to music and eventually building a career substantial enough to be discussed in terms of millions of dollars. He attended the BET Awards. He was headlining shows in major venues. His social media following grew steadily, and his name became synonymous with Memphis rap authenticity for an entire generation of drill music listeners. His success has been real and visible and very public. He was the kind of artist whose name meant something specific in Memphis rap circles, and whose lifestyle signaled that the come-up had been real and was continuing to grow. His lifestyle on social media has been entirely consistent with that success, and his fan base grew partly because people believed the authenticity of what he was presenting. That authenticity is important context for understanding why his mother's accusations hit so hard when they arrived. According to Alexander, their relationship had already been strained for a long time before things fully broke down publicly. She described experiencing anxiety, depression, and what she called narcissistic abuse from her son. These were not throwaway phrases used for dramatic effect. She repeated them consistently across multiple public platforms and described the emotional toll in terms that made clear she was not simply upset about money. She was describing a pattern of behavior she attributed to him that had affected her mental health and her stability over an extended period. She said the falling out between them led directly to him stopping the financial support she had been depending on, leaving her facing a situation she said had now happened to her 3 separate times because of choices he made. In her own words on the GoFundMe she launched, she wrote that she had lived in Memphis before moving to Texas, that she had worked, had her own car, and had her own place before making that transition, and that once the support stopped, she did not know anyone in Texas well enough to ask for help. The vulnerability in those words was something people responded to immediately, and not just with sympathy. They also responded with anger directed at her son. The specific accusations Alexander made about how he was spending his money added a level of detail that turned this from a vague family dispute into something much more pointed and specific. She accused Finesse2Tymes of spending approximately $4 million on friends, marijuana, flying people back and forth, jewelry, and girlfriends, while not supporting his own family the way she believed he should. That last part, the girlfriends, hit differently for a lot of people. The idea that a rapper was spending heavily on women he was dating while his own mother faced eviction and had to crowdfund $6,000 became one of the sharpest edges of the entire story. It was the kind of detail that made the situation feel personal in a way that generic complaints about celebrity spending habits usually do not. She made clear that when family members did receive anything from him, there were strings attached, and the giving was never genuine. She told him directly to keep his money if it came with conditions. Those specific accusations gave the story a concrete edge that made them difficult to dismiss with a simple denial. $4 million on a lifestyle and the women. $6,000 that would have kept his mother from being evicted. That contrast was not lost on anyone watching. The GoFundMe campaign Alexander launched became one of the biggest single talking points of the entire controversy. She set a goal of $6,000 to cover moving expenses, transportation, and deposits for a new place after her landlord gave her only days to pay or leave the property. She attached photographs of her belongings packed into cardboard boxes and large black trash bags, images that circulated widely across social media and that many people found genuinely heartbreaking. In her description, she wrote about her urgent need to find a new place to live, about not knowing anyone in Texas who could help her, and about the fact that this was not a new experience for her. She stated directly that this was the 3rd time her son's actions had left her homeless, and that each time it had become harder to recover. That phrase, the 3rd time, became one of the most repeated details in every conversation about this story, because it suggested a pattern rather than a single difficult moment. The fundraiser raised over $2,000 relatively quickly, which showed that a real audience was paying attention and choosing to put money behind their sympathy. But the campaign itself raised questions that the internet debated constantly. Was a man with the kind of money Finesse2Tymes has allegedly accumulated really allowing his mother to crowdfund $6,000 for an emergency move while he spent freely on everything else in his life? The optics were brutal, and he had to know it. What made Alexander's situation even harder to navigate, and what added another entire dimension to the public conversation, was a legal issue she had been dealing with at the same time. This was the detail that explained why the obvious solution, finding a new apartment, was not actually available to her the way it would be to most people in a housing emergency. In early 2024, she was charged with money laundering in connection with what she described as a scam carried out by Nigerian fraudsters. She maintained that she was a victim of the scam rather than a willing participant. But the charge was still open as of August 2025 when the story broke publicly. The case had already caused her to be denied by 3 separate apartments when she tried to secure housing, because the charge showed up on background checks that potential landlords ran. So she was not simply dealing with the loss of income. She was dealing with a legal situation that was actively blocking her from accessing the solutions that most people would turn to in a housing emergency. The combination of the cutoff, the eviction, the legal case and the isolation of being in a city where she did not know, people painted a picture of a woman who was genuinely trapped. Then came the moment that made the internet stop scrolling. Alexander posted a video showing herself purchasing a used car so she could commute to a regular job she had taken to support herself. The video spread rapidly and became one of the defining images of this entire controversy. Not because there is anything wrong with buying a used car or working an ordinary job, but because the context surrounding it was so stark. Finesse2Tymes had built an entire public persona around luxury vehicles, showing off cars and a high-end lifestyle across his social media platforms. And his mother was on the internet celebrating the purchase of a modest used vehicle simply so she could get herself to a job and back. The images did not require commentary. The contrast did all the work. People understood immediately what they were looking at and what it communicated within the larger context of everything Alexander had already said publicly. The video was shared across every major platform, appeared in reaction videos from bloggers and commentators, and became the single visual that most people associated with the entire feud when they tried to explain it to someone who had not been following along. She described the experience of returning to regular employment as humbling but necessary. She made clear that she was not looking for a handout, that she was willing to work and rebuild her life from wherever she found herself, but that the emotional and financial toll of what had happened was enormous. She talked openly about struggling with anxiety and depression throughout this period, and described the weight of what she called narcissistic abuse from her son as something that had made an already difficult situation feel nearly impossible at times. She was not performing distress for the camera. She was describing her actual circumstances with a level of detail and consistency that was hard to dismiss. She was showing up, telling her story, and continuing to tell it even as her son stayed largely silent and let his payment screenshots and his Instagram do the talking for him. There was a resilience in how she kept showing up publicly and kept speaking about what she was going through. And that resilience is part of what kept people invested in her story, even as the drama around it escalated and new voices entered the conversation. Finesse2Tymes did eventually respond, and his response introduced a different layer to the story that some people found compelling and others found unconvincing. He posted screenshots on Instagram showing alleged payment records to his mother, with recipients listed as Pluria Alexander, Moms, and Mom's Deuce, appearing to demonstrate that he had in fact been sending her money over time. The point he was making was clear. He had not simply ignored her financial needs. There was a documented history of support that predated the public accusations, and he wanted the internet to see it before forming permanent opinions about his character based solely on her version of events. Alexander responded to this by saying she did not want his money if it came with conditions, telling him directly to keep it, which only added more fuel to a situation that was already burning across every corner of hip-hop social media. But perhaps the most unexpected and entertaining element of the entire situation was the involvement of 50 Cent. On August 12, 2025, 50 Cent posted a video of Alexander making her public statements and captioned it with a message directed at Finesse2Tymes, telling him he looked just like his mother and suggesting he should just call her. The post was widely read as 50 Cent publicly embarrassing Finesse2Tymes in front of one of the largest audiences in hip-hop. Finesse fired back on his Instagram stories in a way that was swift, precise, and widely praised as one of the better celebrity clapbacks in recent memory. He wrote that when 50 Cent called his own son Marquise Jackson, he would call his mother, referencing 50 Cent's own long and publicly documented estrangement from his eldest son, a feud so well known and so bitter that it had been a hip-hop talking point for years. The response was effective because it neutralized 50 Cent's criticism by pointing directly at the glass house he was throwing stones from. It reminded people that 50 Cent had his own extremely public and unresolved family estrangement that he had never resolved despite having far more wealth and far more time to do so. Finesse also changed his Instagram profile picture to an image of Eminem as B-Rabbit from the movie 8 Mile, and posted a freestyle addressing family problems, drawing a deliberate parallel to Eminem's own widely documented painful relationship with his mother. The choice to align himself with that particular narrative was calculated and communicated exactly what he wanted, without requiring him to say much more directly. The relationship between Finesse2Tymes and his mother has layers that the public statements alone cannot fully capture. He has described a dynamic that was complicated from the very beginning, a relationship shaped by the circumstances of his birth and early life that created distance and difficulty that was never fully resolved. Pluria Alexander gave birth to him when she was very young, which meant that in some ways they grew up navigating life alongside each other rather than in the traditional structure of parent guiding child. The years of prior history between them, the legal issues on her side, including the open money laundering case, the street life and significant prison time on his side, all of it contributed to a relationship that was never going to be simple, even when money arrived to smooth over some of the tension. He has also pointed to practical obstacles beyond personal feelings, noting that her credit situation and active felony charge made it legally difficult for him to place assets or property directly in her name, which limited some of the ways he could provide support without creating complications for himself. Public opinion on the situation split hard and fast. On one side were people who believed that no matter what had happened between them, no matter what the history was, a man with the kind of money Finesse2Tymes has allegedly accumulated should never allow his mother to face eviction. The argument was simple, emotional, and resonated with a broad audience. You get rich, you take care of your parents. Whatever they did or did not do when you were growing up, you do not let them crowdfund $6,000 while you spend millions on the people around you who do not share your blood. This perspective dominated early reactions and drove the initial wave of criticism toward Finesse on social media. The images of Alexander with her belongings packed in trash bags while her son continued promoting luxury on his platform were too stark for many people to process charitably, regardless of any other details. On the other side were people who pushed back on that framing and argued that family relationships simply cannot be fairly judged from the outside when years of private history are involved. They pointed to the payment records Finesse posted as evidence that he had been supporting her and had not simply abandoned her. They raised the fact that her active legal situation created genuine complications for how he could help her directly. They noted that a personal falling out does not automatically obligate someone to continue indefinitely funding another person's life. Even a parent, especially when the history of that relationship is not what the public might assume it to be. And they argued that the internet was being asked to form permanent opinions based on one side's emotional public statements and the other side's payment screenshots, neither of which told the complete story. The controversy hit Finesse2Tymes' public image in ways that his music alone could not easily absorb in the short term. Artists who build their brand on authenticity and street credibility are particularly vulnerable to this kind of story, because the audience that supports them holds them to a different standard than they might hold a pop star or a mainstream crossover act. His core audience had followed him through prison, through his comeback, through the highs and the lows of building a rap career from a Memphis street background. They had invested in the idea of who he was. When his mother went public with a GoFundMe, that investment suddenly had to be reconciled with a very different image. He had built a following around a certain kind of authenticity. A man who had been through the prison system, who had come out and built something real against significant odds, who spoke plainly about life and money and survival in ways his audience trusted. That image absorbed meaningful damage when his name became primarily associated in public conversation with his mother's GoFundMe and the used car video. Discussions that would normally center on his releases and career trajectory shifted entirely to questions about character, about what loyalty looks like when you have money, and about what success is actually worth if it does not extend to the people who were present before the checks started coming in. Before we get to the broader conversation this story sparked, it is worth sitting with what the contrast between these two people actually looked like from the outside. One of them was posting BET Awards attendance, luxury lifestyle content, and music promotions on social media. The other was posting photos of cardboard boxes and trash bags and celebrating the purchase of a used car. One of them was being referenced as someone who spent millions on their circle. The other was asking strangers online to help her reach a $6,000 goal. That contrast is not complicated to understand. It does not require legal analysis or knowledge of their private history. It is simply visible, and it is what drove the story to the places it went. The broader conversation this story sparked is one that surfaces repeatedly in hip-hop, because the intersection of street success, family complexity, and public scrutiny creates situations with no clean resolution. When an artist achieves financial success from a background like Finesse2Tymes, the expectations placed on them by the public often do not account for the complicated dynamics that existed in their families before the money arrived. People who grew up with fractured family structures, who spent years in prison, who had to rebuild from almost nothing, sometimes carry family relationships with damage that money alone cannot simply purchase away. And yet the public tends to reduce those situations to a single question. You have the money. Why is your mother struggling? The nuance that sits beneath that question rarely survives the speed at which social media forms and spreads opinions. By the time a story has been shared 10,000 times, the context has usually been stripped away and what remains is the image. And in this case, the image was a mother with her belongings in trash bags and a modest used car she bought to get herself to work, set against a son who was posting luxury on his feed. That image was not going anywhere, regardless of what payment records or explanations came after it. Pulling all of this together, the story of Pluria Alexander and Finesse2Tymes covers a remarkable amount of ground for what began as a GoFundMe campaign seeking $6,000. It moved through a mother's public accusations, a rapper's alleged lavish spending, a viral eviction, a legal situation blocking her from basic housing, a used car that became a cultural symbol, a freestyle, a 50-cent call-out, an Eminem reference, payment screenshots, and a countrywide debate about what wealthy artists owe the people they came from. It became a story about how far a public falling out can travel when the images are emotionally powerful enough. It became a story about a mother dealing with eviction, a money laundering case, housing denials, a used car, and a regular job, while her son's payment records and Instagram presence told a different version of the same relationship. It became a story about 50 Cent's own family contradictions being weaponized as commentary. It became a story about Eminem and 8 Mile and what it means to publicly compare yourself to an artist who also had a complicated and painful relationship with his mother. And it became a story about how little control any of us have over how our private relationships are interpreted once they reach the internet at scale. At the end of the day, this is not simply a story about money, even though money is the thing that made it go viral. It is a story about what happens inside families that are built under difficult circumstances, where the emotional architecture never quite catches up to the financial reality that eventually arrives. It is about what it means to grow up navigating a relationship that never had a stable foundation, and then to find yourself on opposite sides of that relationship in full view of the internet when the pressure finally cracks the surface. It is about how quickly a narrative can travel once the images are powerful enough, and how difficult it is to reclaim any part of your story once it has been processed and distributed by millions of people who do not have access to the private history that shaped every decision involved. It is about what loyalty means when a relationship has always been messy, and about what responsibility looks like when one person has resources and another does not, regardless of how complicated the history between them might be. The public conflict between Finesse2Tymes and his mother Pluria Alexander has become one of the most emotionally resonant and widely debated family stories in modern hip-hop. And wherever it ultimately goes from here, the questions it raised about success, obligation, family, and forgiveness are not going away anytime soon. Hip-hop has always been a genre where the people who made it out are expected to bring people with them. When those expectations are not met, or when they are met in complicated ways that the public cannot fully see or understand, the conversation that follows tends to be loud, emotional, and lasting. This story was all three of those things, and it will continue to be referenced whenever the subject of celebrity responsibility and family comes up in the culture. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Finesse2Tymes should have stepped up regardless of their history? Or do you think the full story is more complicated than what played out online? And do you think his response handled the situation the right way? Or did the payment screenshots and the 50-cent clapback miss the point entirely? Let us know where you stand, and make sure you subscribe so you never miss a documentary like this one.